Men are the prize podcast. Welcome back. I hope you've had a great week. I hope the month, the year, we're getting close to maybe the end of a year, and I hope everything is going well for you. I hope everything you're reaching for, striving for, all the things that you want to accomplish, I hope you're close. I hope you can see the finish line. And even if you can't, it's a journey. And as long as you keep going, you know you're going to be fine. Another great guest, RaRa. I love the name. I like it. I feel like I should be watching you in concert, but I love it. RaRa is my guest this week. And how are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing. The weather is great here. I had a walk this morning. I feel energized. I'm so ready. I feel great. How are you feeling?
I am well, thank you. I am in Florida. The weather is always good, aside from an occasional storm that drops in, some rain, but it's nice, breezy. I'm a New Yorker, so I'm getting used to this all the time.
Okay.
But I'll take the sun. And if you've listened or watched this podcast, you know I love a good bio. And as usual, everyone, my guest, always has a good bio. So allow me to get to this. RaRa, his pronouns are he and him, is a queer, gay, visually impaired, cis Black man, artist, mental health advocate, a lover of house music. I see you. An avid Marvel fan, both MCU and traditional comics. I see you too. A clothing engineer and fashion stan, a reader, ponderer, and is passionate about medicinal plant magic. He received an MA in counseling for mental health and wellness from NYU Steinhardt in 2022, a BA in the psychology of race, gender, and sexuality from CUNY Baccalaureate for Unique and Interdisciplinary Studies, CUNY BA in 2017, and an AAS in menswear design from the Fashion Institute of Technology, better known as FIT, in 2007. Good bio, you've done much, and I hope we're going to get into it. So the reason I'm really happy and honored to have you on here is the genesis of this podcast was a space for men to speak, but in particular, Black men to talk. And it was a little bit harder than I expected. I don't know if hard, but because I know I'm a Black man and I'm not just ready to just pour my soul out to everybody. So I know to a degree it was going to be somewhat difficult for men, and a lot of which don't know me, to just kind of talk. But when I get opportunities for Black men, for successful Black men to talk about anything, because in the end, that's really the point with this. Just talking, whatever we get into is what I'm happy. So when I have an opportunity to talk with, you know, an educated man, somebody who can give me a different perspective on this, we're going to get into it. So again, if I forget, I so appreciate your time and your knowledge being here with me on this podcast. So thank you.
You make it so easy to be here. Thank you again for the offer.
Oh, no problem. So let's get right into it. We're talking Black masculinity, and I've been thinking about this question for the week, because I'm going to have somebody on it, intelligent, educated. When we talk about Black masculinity, should sexuality be part of that conversation? Does it need to be part of that conversation?
Well, I got what an amazing question right in. I think that it depends on who's having the conversation, who's sitting at the table. If it's only Black men, actually, no, the answer is yes. I think, period, regardless of who's at the table. I think the bigger conversation to me is defining Black and then also defining masculinity, right? What does either one of those things mean? I'm constantly completely clear and then also completely confused. So yeah, I think sexuality has to be a part of it, but we have to, I think, step back and define first before we can even get into that.
Understood. When you talk about, you know, really defining it, I know, and I'm pretty sure I'm a little bit older than you, but I grew up Long Island, but not the typical Black male. I grew up, I'm an 80s kid, by the way. I love the 80s. That's
I'm
my
in the 90s.
The music, the decade, everything about it. So I grew up listening to 80s music. So I'm Def Leppard, I'm Bon Jovi, I'm all that stuff, which is not typically Black. So when you said we have to define Black, I know growing up as a teen, I was confused about what Black meant, because I didn't fit in. I didn't fit in terms of the shows I watched, the music I listened to, the girls who were interested in me. All these things didn't fit. So I was like, So at times I'm like, I'm not black enough to hang with the brothers. I'm not white enough to hang
Mhm.
with them. I was in this middle space.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even being about, and it's so good that you separated black and masculinity, because it wasn't even about being a man. It was just about being black. That's just where I
Mhm.
started. And then there's so much more to it. But this is the kind of conversation I'm hoping to get into. But we're going to get into you. And through that, we're going to do it. If you've listened or watched this podcast, you know where I go with this. Men are the prize is the title. Prize is the word I use. 4 of the letters represent characteristics that I think are good ones for a man to have. And we're going to talk about those. The first letter in the word prize is P. The word is purpose.
Mm.
Reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists. So, RaRa, what is your purpose?
My purpose is to be as authentically me as possible, regardless of where I am, because I did not have any type of um, real role model. There were Black Andre Leontele always comes to mind, but to me, he wasn't a real person. He was this larger than life TV personality, right? I could never engage him. And this is also at a time when there was no internet or email, or, I didn't have access. So my purpose is to be like a real person, right? A real queer, gay, Black man who is accessible and real. Real meaning like tangible, but also real as in like, you want to talk about it, let's talk about it, right? Um, but to also be able to like speak to multiple generations, like have a conversation with my uncle who's in his 60s, but also have a conversation with like 20-year-olds, right? So I want to be very, my purpose is to be a part of the cultural lexicon that includes my identities, right? To be able to talk to Black men, to be able to talk to gay men, to be able to talk to gay Black men, to be able to talk to Black artists, to be able to talk to Black mental health professionals, right? So it's my purpose to just like be out here, right? Like, and be a part of what's going on, so that there is a voice that perhaps my nephew, for instance, can be like, yeah, that's my uncle. I'm cool. Like, like he understands the world and everything that's kind of going on. To be as beneficial and intentional as possible.
How long have you been authentically you?
Oh, it's been very recent. I would say in the last 6 years or so. During that time, uh, I have an NDA, so I have to be very specific about how some very unfortunate things happened at a place of business I was working at. Um, I went through a master's program. Um, I am getting a divorce from a cis white man. Um, I I've worked in higher education at this point. Um, there was a point in working in fashion, so I'm a career switcher. There was a point working in fashion where it was kind of easy to just kind of be. In fashion, it was easy. You're gay and you're Black. There's not a lot of us, but like it's just kind of easy to be, right? But when I switched into human services, if you will, just no one like me. I've not engaged anyone who's like me. And so I'm constantly having to battle, try to figure out what's appropriate for me and what's not appropriate for me. And that's like a daily thing. Like, what am I going to do? Am I going to be like the Black guy, or am I just going to fall back? Right. And just like let whatever happening happen. And I think I just made a conscious decision about 5 or 6 years ago that I was just like, I'm not falling back anymore. If it affects my life, it's probably going to affect my nephew's life at some point, and I can't have that. Like, my life's already been difficult enough. So um, it's not been that long.
Okay. Okay. So with your, I guess your discovery or your realization of your authentic self, has is code switching gone? Is that out
For
of the
the
picture?
for the most part, I think. Um, so again, because I have intersectional identities, the Black code switching is done. I never I am me in all places. There's times when my queerness or my gayness, I code switch a bit. Um, it's a very pick your battle type situation. Am I going to die on this hill? I'm not sure. Um, because most times, if there are peers that I'm working with, they are Black women and they are Black straight women. And so, in order to push the conversation along, sometimes the Black card can be more important than other parts of my identity. So, the Black code switching, that's gone. But other parts of my identities sometimes still creep up.
All right. Well, then let me ask, since you mentioned that I guess you deal with a lot of Black cis women, what is there, I'm sure there is, but what's the difference between the relationship, the back and forth when you deal with Black women versus just Black men in general? Let's not go into sexuality yet. So what's the vibe? Is there a significant difference?
I think there is a difference. Funny enough, I got into this industry because I wanted to work with Black men. And what I've noticed is that Black women flock to me. And I think that has to do with a safe space, understanding that I'm open and emotionally available and vulnerable and willing to engage um, as a feminist, if you will, or a woman ally. Um, uh, and it often feels very easy. I grew up in a matriarchy as well. So I grew up with like one uncle, that's it, just surrounded by women. So the conversation tends to be much easier. With Black men, I find that there's a lot of education usually with regards to even being able to engage emotionality, language, understanding feelings and like where it is in the body. Um, so the conversations are just very different in that way. When I know you said don't bring sexuality into it, but immediately I start thinking about dating, and I'm like, oh, like you can't date a therapist if you are not emotionally available, right? And I keep hitting this roadblock, and I'm like, I'm dating Black and brown men exclusively at this point, and I keep hitting this roadblock, and that roadblock was um, the same reason that clients would come to me, Black male cis clients would come to me, wanting to understand how to be emotional. Is it okay to be emotional? What does it look like? How does it sound? And all of that. And that's very different than the women I work with or worked with, and the women that um, socialize with as well.
All right. So matriarchal upbringing, I think you mentioned. So you deal, I guess, patients, Black males, such. Are you able to notice a distinct difference between how you were raised, matriarchal, all are women, versus these Black men and how they were raised? Are there specific things that happened that you had happen for you that they didn't have happen for them? Or vice versa, some happened for them, not for you. And then you can kind of see maybe why they're not emotionally available or why they don't understand the emotional language and such. What do you gauge from these conversations you have?
Strangely enough, and maybe controversial, most of them had fathers that were in the picture, but the fathers were not emotionally available, had no communication skills, sometimes were abusive, verbally, physically, emotionally. Um, that's unfortunately the through line. Um, I did not grow up with a father at all. And so while that in and of itself has trauma attached to it, I also wasn't exposed to toxic masculinity. Um, and so I also don't really know how to deal with toxic masculinity at times. And that's not to suggest that all Black men or brown men have toxic masculinity issues, right? Um, but my experience in my personal life and my clinical life, the through line is unhealthy relationships with Black father figures, which I think is just a strange and very different conversation than what is usually had, I think, in um, the broader cultural sense. It's usually that the Black male is not there. Um, and that's not the experience of conversation that I'm having.
makes me wonder I know it's a bad thought. What's worse, not having dad at all versus having a bad dad there?
Yeah.
It's it's a sad thought. Um, Now, you said you haven't had to experience toxic masculinity per se, but since you were around and were raised by a lot of women, do you remember the experience of maybe them, and maybe they just shielded you from it because you were a child, but do you remember of experiences of these women dealing with it and maybe them telling you about it or seeing how they responded to it? Do you have some recollection of how you saw toxic masculinity maybe through the eyes of the women that you were around?
Yeah, unfortunately. My mom was married at one point, and I could hear things said, like I didn't fuck with him at all. He was just, I was like, Mom, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing?
Mhm.
But I could hear things, right? And there were times where we lived in an apartment building where my cousin lived downstairs. And there were times where I had to like run down to my cousin's house and be like, what the fuck do we do? Like, they're fighting. Um, I don't know how far that went because my mom is very, very kind of stern. And I think it got to a certain point where she was just like, you got to go. And he kind of disappeared and he's since died. But yeah, it was there. Um, it was always handled very secretly, or it wasn't talked about. I remember one of my other aunts was in a very abusive relationship for a very, very long time. And the word abuse was used, but it wasn't really defined. And it was always talked about in the with regards to the husband. And I remember always thinking, well, how is Aunt, I won't say her name, how is she doing? Like, what is she doing? How is she handling this? I remember thinking about that as a kid. So it was around, but I think I was very shielded from it. I grew up with like incredibly strong women who were just like, no, go, time to go. Um, and a lot of the women in my family um, were single for a lot of my childhood, or I just didn't have access to their relationships. So I didn't see what it looked like in any way at all. And in fact, often did not even see their husbands because their husbands weren't like part of the family, if that makes sense. Um, so it was there, but I was not directly kind of exposed to it.
Okay. So not a lot of, I guess, men in the inner circle for you and family, but maybe they had men kind of in the, outside of you. How does that affect your perception of men growing up? And I guess eventually you being a gay man, how does that affect you seeing them as just men in general, but then as potential significant others? What do you think about that as you grow?
Uh, it's confusing because I don't know what a man should look like or sound like. Uh, I understood I also grew up very Christian, so I understood what was appropriate, like in the Christian viewpoint, but I was also an artist from a very small age and hung out with a lot of very creative artistic people. And so there was a very big um, difference between kind of my personal life, no, my family life and my personal life. I was being told very strictly that men are this, but in my personal life, I was seeing men wear makeup and kiss each other and drag. And so it was very confusing because I didn't have access to a man that I've respected and engaged often. I don't want to downgrade my uncle. My uncle was there, my mom's twin brother. Um, but he was very gentle and very quiet. And my mom is not those things. So he kind of fell back in the same way that I fell back. And I don't remember having a lot of access to him. And when I did, the conversations weren't deep at all. Um, and so, in accessing men at an older age, both professionally and personally, I just, I'm constantly, it's a learning experience. And like, I've never done this before. How does this work? How do we talk? How do we not talk? How do we touch each other? How do we not touch each other? It's a learning experience.
Mhm. I know growing up and just in general, when I hear men being talked about, where I think, and it obviously has a lot to do with sexuality and just being straight or cis, is that men are very simple creatures. We just we need food, we need sex, and we need to be left alone. So in my head, I've always imagined, and I don't agree with it entirely, but we men are so simple.
Mm.
I guess in terms of the relationship and the woman that's in our lives or whatever, just feed them, fuck them, leave them alone. That type of thing. And the more I've grown up, the more I've recognized that's so far from the truth because we're still trying to figure out what it means to be a man. So people can think that we're simple because you have no concept of what being a man is.
Mhm. And
It's
we're not
it's
talking about it. We're not
yeah.
offering.
Well, no, yeah, and that's true. We're not helping the situation. Yes, we all know what man is. Don't ask me. I'm not telling you, and that's that's really what it
Yeah.
is. So we leave you in the dark, but are probably upset that you don't really understand us. So we've got this. I don't know what do we do, but I had a question. I forgot. It'll come back to me. But I'm loving. It's interesting to hear. Just growing up. Don't know what a man is. Now I'm a man, I'm an adult, and now I have to kind of know what a man is, or I'm creating the
Yeah.
idea of what a man is. Now I'm whatever I am is it. So it's almost not a bad thing, I think. To a degree, you grew up, you didn't have these parameters that you had to stay into. You could just be you
Mhm.
because at that point, maybe you didn't know any better. And I think that's interesting and might even be the better way. I don't have
It,
to be
it
just like that black guy. You
it
know,
wasn't easy.
I agree.
I like the way that I love the way that you're painting it because I've never thought of it in that way. I was very queer, and that is to suggest that I was very non-normative. It has nothing to do with my sexuality. I was an artist, right? Artists and queer are the same to me, right?
Okay.
You're outside of the norm, if you will. So I was very that. Um, and I think that that was conflated with my sexuality. And so there was a confusion between like what it is to be a man and what it is to be gay, and those two things don't really need to be together at all.
Mhm.
So the man thing, I love the way that you're saying it, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to not be like mask or whatever that means, or wear what all the other boys were wearing or doing what all the other boys were doing. While there was freedom, I didn't fit in, which made me a target for both I think my family and my peers.
That's a good point. You're free to be, but with whom else? With who? So you can be who you are, but you essentially are alone in your freedom, which is not comfortable. I'd rather be kind of put me in a box. At least have people with me in there, right? Oh
Yeah.
wow.
A 15-year-old wants to fit in, wants to
Yeah,
have friends, doesn't want
yeah,
to be the weirdo, you know?
yeah. Mhm. That's all we've got. When we're that age, the social thing is it. Who am I friends with? What sports team am I on? I mean, who likes me? Who doesn't like me?
Mm-hmm.
Who am I going to prom with?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that's just boys. So for me, the more I've had these discussions with men, and like I said, I wanted this to be for black men, but at the beginning of this, I just had white men, just regular men talk to me because a lot of the issues that we have, all men deal with in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
But to me, I've got this idea. So just being a boy, 15, let's say cis, and I want to date that girl, but she doesn't like me. Those guys are football players, they're big, they always beat me up. I've got all these things. I'm just all this social stuff I'm trying to deal with. So I can't even fit in. And that's just being a regular white kid.
Mm-hmm.
Then add on black. Now I'm black. And chances are I'm not in a school where there's a lot of people who look like me. So chances are it's a lot of white kids who there's a subtle bit of racism, whatever, or they won't talk to me, whatever. So add socially, I'm struggling. Now I'm black and I'm struggling. Then if you put gay on top of it, like how do you deal? So
Yeah.
it's not a surprise that we have kids, teens who are struggling with depression, with
Mm-hmm.
gender. There's so much going on
Mm-hmm.
that I mean, I don't know. I don't imagine you deal with teens. You deal with more men, but do you deal with that? Or I'm sure you see it when you talk to black men and and adults.
Yeah, it doesn't go away. I don't work. I don't tend to work with anyone under 18 because regulations that I don't want to
Right.
involve myself with.
Understood.
But even if I'm working with a 50-year-old man, it's like I'm working with a 16-year-old, because we're dealing with being all of these identities and never really being able to figure out where you fit in. Like, I'm still having the same issues now and trying to figure out my professional setting, for instance, right? Where do I fit in? Where do I want to be? Where will I feel the most safe? That's the same conversation a 15-year-old has, right? And when you have when you are male, when you identify as a man and you identify as Black, it's just never easy. It's just like, where do I go? I had a couple of Black friends, and I'll make one correction on what you said. It wasn't subtle racism. I grew up in Maryland. I was called nigger, I don't know how many times. I was called nigger faggot 8 times in my life so far. Like, these things, they weren't subtle at all. So, have that same, trajectory that you just had, but take out the idea of subtle. It's really about, like, where do I fit in? Where am I going to be safe? And again, unfortunately, right, like, being a therapist allows me access to other people's voices. And in certain parts of the Western world, um, primarily thinking of the South, growing up Black and male, and then adding in gay, is exceptionally difficult and exceptionally dangerous. Um, so it's, again, 15 or 35, it's the same conversation, really, because those identities don't go away.
I I see. To me, I hear you talking about it, and I'm really just I'm falling back into high school. I really am, and hearing you
Mhm.
talk about this. To me, and I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it. To me, I feel like there's a difference between not fitting in places and then not being wanted. Like, you were
Mm.
talking about how because I said subtle, because I grew up with subtle racism, but because New York, Long Island, we're liberal, blah, 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 whatever, versus Maryland, where they don't give a damn. So I just didn't fit because I wasn't cool with those kids. And I don't think they were, versus these people they want to make it clear that you're not allowed. And there's a difference there, right? I'm not reading into that, right?
Oh, I think there is I think in you bringing it up, there is a difference, and us perhaps comparing our experiences. I think that there is a difference, um, a very big difference, and I appreciate you even suggesting that. It's not that I wanted to fit in. It's that
Right,
I was just literally looking for safety. Like,
right.
where am I allowed
Mhm. Right.
as a Black man, period, but then as a gay man, period, right? Like,
Mhm.
both of those together, that's not a conversation. I got to pick one or the other.
Mhm. Mhm. I've had a lot of discussions about the word safe. And since primarily this is a podcast for men and Black men, which is the plan, safe for us has an entirely different meaning than it would for women. I just want to be somewhere where I'm safe enough to be me
Mhm.
and to be around people who will accept it. And I'm like, I talk to women, and safe is, I don't want to get attacked. I don't want to get
Yeah.
raped. I want to feel safe walking down the street. While as a man, I mean, it's still there because we are, we're victims of violent crime more than women actually. But the idea that safe for me means just I can talk and whatever I say is not going to be used against me. I can speak freely. It's so interesting. Just life experience is so different. It's a simple word as safe. It means so many different things to so many different people. I want to be safe as a Black man.
Mhm.
What does it mean to be safe as a queer Black man? Like,
Mhm.
there's so much going on, and how we handle it, how we deal with life, how we deal with these experiences really just kind of shapes us. And I think of that because I'm a stay-at-home father. I've got 4. So
Mhm.
for me, how I deal with all of this, I'm pushing it out. I'm sending it to my kids. I got to deal with this right. I don't want to send a bunch of as scared kids or unprepared kids into the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
So I got to give them safety here. I got to give my 3 daughters safety physically and emotionally too. And then I got to give my 18-year-old son safety. Speak however you'd like, but physically also. It's this, the better I am, and I tell this people all the time, the better I am, me pulling my mask down first, the better I am here, the better my wife, my kids, everybody around me. It's this process. It's a bit of pressure
Yeah,
to being a good man, but being a good Black man because we affect everybody around
we
us.
do. And this is why I wanted to, this is why I was very strategic in wanting to work with Black men. Again, I'm shook that it's Black women that come to me. But my idea was, if I can get to Black men and help them understand how to be more emotional creatures, how to talk about things openly and honestly, then that's a trickle down effect. The women who touch them will be different. Their children will be different. Their lovers in general will be different. Perhaps their parents will be different. I saw the Black man. I saw it in myself, and like I touch so many people. If I can be better, perhaps they will be better. And there is, it's new to me, this idea of like mental health, medical uh, success of Black men, if you will. I don't think we are a space that is prioritized.
Oh, no,
Um,
not at
and
all.
so everything you just said, right? Like, if I am better, everyone around me will be better.
That's really what this is. That's why this podcast came along. I like, and I think I have the same mission, you with a more professional face to it. I just wanted to get men talking. We're not alone in a
Mhm.
lot of the struggles and issues and concerns that we have. But since we don't talk, I think we feel like we're alone. So because I don't know another Black man who is simply was depressed because the first girl he wanted to date broke his heart in high school and he didn't have a dad to say, I don't know, am I good enough? Is any girl gonna like me? Is any boy gonna like me? Whatever. Like,
Mhm.
and it starts so small. It's these little
Mhm.
things, these little struggles in high school, and then going on, and then I don't have confidence in the 10th grade, then I'm not gonna have a confidence in that first interview. I'm not gonna have confidence when I try to talk to
Oof.
somebody in the bar. It's
Yeah.
it's this just progression. And I'm like, I wanted to get men. I wanted to talk, get it out. You are not strange. You are men just like me. I went through that same shit a few years ago. Here's what
Yep.
I did to get through it. How
Yep.
did you deal with this? Really? That's what you did? Oh my God. 99% of the issues I feel like us men have are solved if we would sit down, listen to each other, and just talk.
Talk. Open your
That's
mouth.
it. Just what happened. I don't have to give you an answer. Just tell me. We don't have to solve anything. We could
Mhm.
just say it.
Mhm.
So this is good. We continue with the next letter in the word prize. It is R. The word is resilience.
Mm.
The capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. So you've mentioned a few things, but see if we can come up with something else, or you can kind of stick with what you talked about. Can you think of a particular situation, something that happened to you where you discovered a resilience that you didn't know that you had?
I think it's when I started to move into human services spaces. Um, I discovered the resilience of like self-care. And these are all buzzwords, right? Like
Mhm.
self-care meaning like I am literally taking care of myself, my physical self, my emotional self, my psychological self, because there is no one else in the room, and or rooms expansive, right? HR, no one looks like me. No one has my best interest at heart. And so that has to kick in really quickly when you understand you got to pay rent and you got to figure out this workspace. You understand I figured out really quickly how to have really awkward and direct conversations gently, because white people be fragile. Fragile as fuck. And I'm like, wait, pause. Pause, 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 pause. This is not about you. This is
Mhm.
about me and the sea of white people around me, and I'm terrified, and your policies are not working for me as a Black man, and I would like to discuss that. And I found myself so awkwardly initially doing that. And then it just became easier and easier and easier and easier, um, to the point where like I created the name RaRa for a very specific reason. And it's turned into something else. It's turned into this idea of like, there's a direct aggression to it, and aggression doesn't have to be violent, right? It just has to be intentional. Like rah, rah, rah. Like you're not doing what I need you to do. You keep giving me bullshit answers, or you keep giving me answers that are not actually defining how we're moving forward with change. And so rah, 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 like I'm going to stay on you. Um, and that is a resiliency that I don't think I'm learning that other people don't have, whether it be because of privilege, me being a man and me being a big man, right? Um, or because I'm black. I don't know, because I will play that angry black man card real quick. You're already going to think I'm black, so I'm going to or angry, so I'm going to utilize that to like get what I need. And this is usually in professional spaces. I'm very professional focused at this point because I'm not seeing us. And I live in fucking New York City. I'm not seeing us. And it's weird. It's weird to have a business meeting with all white people. Yeah. It's just fucking weird. Why are we still doing this? So I'm very like focused on professionalism, and the resiliency like needed in professional spaces. I'll also suggest that I don't love the word resilient, right? Especially in professional spaces, because it connotes that like you are not going to change, that I have to figure out how to take up the slack and take care of myself in a system that's clearly not made for me. I think resiliency with regards to emotionality, sure. Your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your non-binary partner breaks up with you. You need to be resilient to get through your life, right? As an adult, let's talk about adults. But in professional spaces, the word resiliency, it hits me wrong. It,
Yeah, I
it
hear
makes me it makes me twitch a little bit.
I hear that. And I really thought, but I never thought about that. But I can understand. It's a level of kind of accepting what's happening as opposed to fixing what's happening. Like, what do I do about it, as opposed to how do I deal with it? So I understand. I understand exactly what you mean. Um, that's good. Do you have any suggestions for Black men who kind of understand what you're going through, who are in professional spaces and find themselves alone, sequestered in these spaces, and don't see a familiar face? How do you suggest we deal?
I suggest that you have as many conversations in writing as you possibly can. Tea, like real tea. If that meeting can be recorded, if you are on Zoom and that meeting can be recorded, please do that. Or get it in an email. Outside of that, I would say find the people in your space that you can trust as much as you can. You literally can't be an island, right? You cannot do it alone. So be kind, be open and honest, and find those people who have your back to a certain extent,
Understand.
because
I
you
talk.
will need it.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. So you talk, and I apologize for cutting you off. I talk to a lot of men, and there's two questions that I ask, and I usually wait for the end, but you kind of broached it. Black men, I don't know if we have our tribes or our group of friends as much as we used to. So personally, just friends. So I can extend that to the whole business side. Do I have a team of people that I trust in a professional setting? But to a degree, outside of that, we men, we go through things alone. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about anything, but we don't have people to speak to about things. So that's a weird way to segue into Black men and friendship. How important is, in a personal sense, is having Black, for men, Black men, Black friends, Black male friends in your life? How does it help you, and how does it hurt when you don't have?
It's such a good question. Thank you. It is 100% paramount to me to have Black friends, Black male friends, specifically for me, Black male queer friends, because it's the same thing about being a Black queer therapist, right? Like there's just a certain baseline that you just don't have to explain. You're just you. It just can be. You can just cut up. You can just say whatever you want. There's no like PC-ness or like hurting anyone else or making sure everyone feels comfortable. There's like a baseline of just like, we generally have the same experience. Let's go. Um, and I'll tell you, it's something I've been working on for like the last 5 or 6 years in the same time frame that I've like made this switch about like, this is who I am. This is how I'm going to live my life. Um, my friend base tends to be white women because those will be in the spaces I work at, or who are in the spaces that I go to, whether it be dancing or drinking or whatever it is. And I crave having more Black gay male friends. What I will suggest is that I am running into the same issue where there is a lack of emotionality, there's a lack of presentness, there is a lack of like not being on the phone when we are hanging out. You know, these things are very frustrating to me, and I think generational situation. So it's not the easiest thing. I will say that I made an amazing Black gay male friend at the job that I'm currently at. And what a fucking blessing. His name is Bernie. And like since day one, we were just like together, like period. There was no conversation about why we liked each other so much. We were just together. And in fact, I saw him this morning. I was out on a walk with him this morning. And it was, my day started out right. Like I knew I saw him and then I knew I was going to see you. And like, it's a day of like Black men. And that makes me feel good. It makes me feel safe. It makes me feel affirmed. Um, you know?
Oh yeah, I really understand that because that's kind of my experience is this. I grew up in New York. I'm a New Yorker through and through, but I live in Florida now. But before that, I met my wife in New Jersey and we moved to Florida. So we've been here a little less than 2 years.
Mm.
And stay-at-home dad of 4 means that my life is wrapped around these kids. Almost my identity is I'm taking care of them. I don't have a lot of friends out here.
Mm.
And so this sometimes I want to get away from these kids because I love them and all, but damn, I just gotta go. And I don't have that group, that tribe to be like, you know what, these kids, that parent teacher conferences, this kid gotta go to ballet, blah, 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 whatever. Yo, let's go get a drink, whatever. I don't have that here yet. And it's
Yeah.
that process. It is difficult to kind of find some people because I hope to eventually, I have family here, cousins and such, but I'd like to not always have to lean on family or something. I'd like to have a friend, a father, Black father, be like, you know what this kid did yesterday, blah, 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 whatever that.
Exactly.
Doesn't require I don't have to build a foundation. I could just walk, yo, check it out. So she did such and such. Like, yo. And when you don't have it, you understand it. Because
Yeah.
that's kind of my struggle right now. And I'm building that and I've got friends and doing the podcast and obviously meeting you. And if nothing else, even if this went sideways, I have another Black friend and I'm so glad that we got to talk. But I understand personally the need, the craving for somebody who understands your experience, who can talk to you about the experience. I'd love to hear somebody else. So it's not like me just bitching about it. Like he went through that shit yesterday. He knows what I'm talking about. And I think it's important, but even more important for Black men. Because just at times, I feel like just life is tough. Just living, just getting up out my house and driving the car and making it back home.
Like you triggered me in driving the car. No, like that's a lot for me. I haven't driven a car in,
Oh my God,
I don't
that's
know,
right.
5 years.
Oh my goodness.
And one of that is because of like, that shit's hard. Like, no, I don't want to be in a car on, no, just no. But you having that, you just saying that, like instantly I get it. Instantly. And I gotta explain that to other people.
Yep. And that's it. And that's it. And I think some people take that, I know some white people might take that wrong. It's like me, one of the Black therapists, it's not a slight to you. What it is that it's just somebody who understands. Like I could really be like, listen, my point was at 1. I got here 1:15. I was at the barbershop. And I was supposed to be seen at 12:15. It wasn't until 12:30. Like there was, you'd be like, you know what? You shouldn't have been late, but I understand why.
All you
Like,
have to say is I was at the barber shop, and
oh,
I'd
it's
be
the
like,
raps.
nigga,
Like,
come on.
I got you, and understand. And like, there's just some things that not everybody gets, and I think people will take that negatively, and it's not negative. It's just
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
And it's a whole other conversation. My wife has a partner, has people that she works with, and who at times I've heard several people say to her, you know what, I just don't see color. And I really want to just say, that's not good.
It's not
You're not
good.
you're not defending yourself. You're not making your case because you don't see color. Like no, then you don't see my wife. You don't see me. You don't see your black friend or your Hispanic friend. You don't see them. We're not a monolith, you
Yeah.
know? We're
Yeah.
different. So it's weird. And again, there's so many issues, just being black, then being gay, then being a dad, then being a businessman, then being all much, just trying to navigate through life without just letting it tear you down. It's tough.
It's very tough. I feel I would like to affirm what you just said and validate you. It is tough. You are not crazy.
Thank you.
It is
I
so
appreciate
tough.
that.
But sometimes I'm just like, why do I feel like this? And I'm like, oh yeah, black man. And
Exactly. Mhm,
you don't
mhm,
get that unless you like just like vibe with another black man for a moment. You're just like,
mhm,
okay,
mhm.
I'm okay. I'm not okay, but I'm okay. Like I'm
Right.
not.
Mhm. I've really come to appreciate something as not even trivial, as simple as just like the black nod when I'm walking somewhere and I see a brother. That nod, there's more to it than just the head snap. It's like, yeah, brother, I see you. I
Mhm,
know you about to go do something crazy, or you just came for something crazy, and that man
mhm.
understands, and I see him too. It's so interesting how brotherhood is a really important, such an important thing. I'm going to skip the I in the word prize because we're going to come back to that. The next
Okay.
letter in the word prize is Z. The word is zeal. Enthusiastic devotion. I love that word. Taking away, I guess, family, significant others, relationships, and the work that you do. I'm
Mhm.
looking to dig a little deeper. Taking all those things and putting them to the side, what are you enthusiastically devoted to?
Oh gosh. I think reading. um, I I love reading. I've always loved reading. When I was very young, reading was very difficult for me, and so it's something that I did often to practice. Um, how about I change? I'm sorry. I do love reading. I
Okay.
love books.
Okay.
And I think there is a distinct, there is a big difference. Reading is fantastic. I don't love reading, for instance, on like a Kindle. That sucks.
Agreed.
Or
Agreed.
on the computer. I did a lot of that for my master's program.
Book. I need
I
to hold a book. I
gotta
feel you.
hold it. I gotta
Yes.
smell it.
Yes.
Books have a scent.
Mhm.
Um, I love them as objects, as art objects, but I also love what they contain, what you can learn. I can learn how to create a Korean buffet of food, or I can learn about African history. I can do anything I want with books. They fascinate me. I'm really enthusiastic about books. Sometimes I just go to the bookstore on weekends and I buy a book. Um, I love books. I love them.
I'm
They
with
make
you.
me so happy. And I think in loving books, the zeal is there for like any and everything. You know, what book? Because that's the question. Like, okay, books. What book? Is it a poem book? Is it a recipe book? Is it a magical book? Um, books. I love books so
I
so
love
so
it.
very much.
I love it. In my 20s, when I was still kind of all over the place, I used to work at the Barnes and Noble in Lincoln Center. It's no
Mm-hmm.
longer there. They tore it down, which is disappointing to me. But I worked in that Barnes and Noble for a few years. I was in the music department. I was in the basement. But I loved that place. It's just a big. I love libraries. I take my kids there, but the Barnes and Noble. I love the idea of just seeing people sitting around with a book they probably just discovered, or probably a book that they've known for years, and they're
Mm-hmm.
reading it for the 50th time. It's books. They carry so much. Simple, but there's so much. A book can mean one thing to you and can be a lifesaver to somebody else.
Yep.
Books are, oh, I loved it. And while I worked in the music department, because I think that's my true love, I'm an old soul music person, but I loved you're right. The smell of a book. I love opening a book. I hated the dog earring because that's just disrespectful to the pages. I love the idea of a really good book, and I'm working on that with my kids because my mom made me read, and I read it. It took me, I fought it for a while. But when I finally got into reading, it was just a problem. And I want my kids to, if the problem for you is reading too many books, I'll take it.
Mm,
So
yeah.
I understand your joy and how much you enjoy books. Your current favorite book is?
I am reading a book called Boys Come First, I believe it's called. And I think we talked about one of the books that what was it? All Boys Aren't Blue.
Right.
That was part of a book haul. I've not read it. I have no idea when I will read it, but it's a beautiful book.
Okay.
But I'm reading a lot of books, a lot of books about Black gay men.
Okay.
And this book is so funny, and it's so, talk about like just jumping right in and being like, oh, this book is written for me.
Okay.
The
Okay.
language, the experiences, I'm like, this is me. And it's just a pleasure to read, and it's funny, and it's kind of vulgar. It's very real. I'm pretty sure it's fiction, but it's just like, get out of my head. This is a good book. I am entertained.
That's good.
Uh,
That's good.
boys come first. I think that's what it is.
Yeah. I'll be at some point because you did a post and I think you mentioned those books and I think I have them already and I'm going to read them and hopefully at some point we can talk about them
I
because
love that.
I'd be interested because it's not going to be coming. It's not going to hit me the way it's going to hit you because
Mhm.
so I'm interested to see when I think about it and what I get from it versus what you get from it. So definitely we can talk about that. It's so interesting. I haven't thought about Barnes and Noble in years. Oh my God, so long ago. Oh wow.
I mean, the Strand is still here. What is it called? Jackson McNally. Bookstores are also just like beautiful. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm obsessed with books. I am literally obsessed with books.
I love it. I love it. The last letter in the word prize, not the last letter in this little mantra we're doing, but the last letter is E. The word is expectation. A strong
Oh,
belief. A strong belief that something will happen or be the case in the future. I try to find a different way to ask about this word with each man that I speak to. So for you, how, I don't know how to get to this. What do you expect if we could get Black men to where we need them to be in society and how we deal with each other and how we deal with the gay men and how we deal with women? What is your expectation? How long do you think legitimately it would take for us to get close to have a better understanding of our environment, of our people around us, whether it's the people who look just like us, or the women around us, or the men who look like us but like men, or anything? What's your expectation about how long it's going to take for us to get to a better place?
that's such a vast question.
No, I'm sorry.
I immediately know I'm very appreciative of you asking it because it makes me think. I don't know, and I'm coming up with the answer. I think that it would take a generation.
Okay.
And I guess I'll define that as like the time you become kind of a sexual being until the time you define yourself as an adult. And I'm thinking that is somewhere between if the time frame is like somewhere between 15 and like 45, right? So 30 years. 30 years of intentionally talking to the generation be, before me and the generation that I'm in and the generation in front of me. Because all three have to work in tangent in order for, I think, a giant cultural shift to happen. It can't just be like, oh, these kids are out here doing it. No, great for them. What about you? And what about your grandfather? Because grandpa's been saying crazy shit. Your uncle is saying crazy shit. We can't have the like super open-minded 20-year-old at the Thanksgiving table and the grandfather or the uncle who's saying crazy. Like that's not, we all have to be intentionally working on ourselves and also working together um, to define what's toxic and what's not, asking people how they want to be treated, and then engaging that data. Um, Having conversations within our family to ensure that like everyone's saying things that are appropriate and doing things that are appropriate. Um, I think that takes time. I think that takes a generation.
Mhm. Do you think a generation needs a monumental event for it to happen? Do they need a Million Man March? Do they need a March on Washington? Do they need something to kind of push them? Or is that something that maybe just with time we kind of find and we go in that proper direction?
No, I think okay. So this is when being like a human behaviorist comes in, right? Like humans need a push. This story has, I think, been written for so many times where something cataclysmic happens and then humanity comes together, right? I think that humans are just kind of blind to what's going on unless something directly affects them very, very deeply. So I'm not sure if it's a march. I think it's what becomes before the march, right? So I'm thinking like it wasn't BLM. BLM is not going to change. For me, it was George Floyd. Like I can like remember him and what was going on and what people around me were saying, and it wasn't matching up with my feelings and how I needed to be seen and understood, and what that did to propel me forward. Um, it wasn't the it wasn't the protest afterwards. That almost felt too late. It was the immediacy of like watching this person die. I'm thinking of like Martin Luther King getting assassinated. I'm thinking of Rodney King in the 90s. It's not what happens after, it's the person. So I think there's unfortunately always a martyr that's needed, in order for people to understand this can happen to you, like right now. You can do with that what you would like, but this is what happened to this person and we're all watching it happen, and it affects you or it doesn't.
That's true. Yeah. Crack wasn't a problem until in the 80s and such, but when it got to the suburbs and such, then we are in an epidemic. Now
Mm-hmm.
drugs are a problem. It's got to hit the masses or it's got to be in their face.
Mm-hmm.
I can understand that entirely. Um, we're gonna go back to that letter in the middle of P.R.I.Z.E. The letter is I, and it doesn't have a word. It represents the man I'm speaking to. So in this case, obviously, it's you. So when we take off the shackles, the titles, all the stuff. So um college graduate, author, just all around awesome black man walking around this world. When you take all these shackles off of you, at your core, by yourself, who are you?
A stoner. No, I'm this like hippie country guy who wants to like walk around in a barefoot with a joint hanging out of his mouth,
Okay.
making jokes.
Okay.
I'm also like a crazy romantic, right? Like I would love to be doing all of those things with like a really smart, kind person
Mhm.
with me. Um, Strip it all away, and I'm just like a clown.
Mhm.
I'm a kid. I
Mhm.
will always be a kid.
I hear you. That's authentically you.
Yeah. It's always about curiosity with me. Like why? Tell me
Mhm.
why. Not in a pushy way, but in like a I'm curious. Tell me why.
Mhm.
Um, I'm a kid.
That's it. That's really it. And as a dad, when I hear you say that, I'm like, that's so great as an adult. As in my 7-year-old daughter who asks me why about every little thing, it's kind of annoying. But for you,
Mhm.
it's charming. For her, it's oh my God.
I mean, give her time, right? Maybe
No,
she doesn't understand why she's asking that why now.
she's
Um,
she's so intelligent. And as in a, and I cringe when she asks, but there's always confide in it because she's smart. She wants to know everything. And I'll take that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for answering the questions in the prize mantra. I appreciate that.
Of
Few
course.
last bit of questions. These are the typical, deep podcast type questions, but kind of my spin on them. So three more. First, what are you afraid of that you cannot control?
I'm deathly ill, like deathly terrified of live fish. Is that the direction you were going in, or like something more emotional?
It's whatever you want it to be, but I never really thought about that. But hey,
I'm,
great.
I'm terrified of fish. Like they are just alien. I don't want to be around them. I'm terrified of police. Like
Valid.
there are mad police in New York City right now. They are everywhere in like groups. I am terrified. I I cross the street. I turn around. I like loop so that I'm just like not near them. Police are terrifying. Um, and then I'll give you a third one. How about that? Nice three: fish, police, and I'm terrified I'm gonna be single for the rest of my life. Um, and there was a point where I was just like, I don't fucking care about no dude, whatever. But now I'm just like, no, like I would like to be in a relationship. And I'm like, that's not necessarily just my choice. I can't control this. And I'm terrified that I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. What does that mean? What do I do? How do I engage? How do I remain happy? Not that I think a man will make me happy, but he can definitely help with happiness. No. So yeah, fish, police, and singleness.
Fish, police, and lack of companionship, or
Yes,
of being lonely as opposed to alone. There's different, I guess, different ways of looking at it.
you're picking up exactly what I wanted, which you did so much better. It's I love being alone, but I don't want to be lonely. And it's giving lonely right now.
Oh, okay. I hear you.
It's there. Yeah.
I know what you mean. When you were talking about the police and how you respond to it, what hit to me is you treat the police the way white women treat black men.
Mm-hmm.
You can away from them. Oh, look, there's three of them over there. Let me cross the street.
Cross street.
I'm in my car, locked up. Let me lock that door. Here comes them black men again. I think how you respond.
What's funny though, sorry to cut you off. What's funny is so my area has become exceptionally gentrified, and I treat white women in the same way that I've been treated. So when white women are walking towards me at night, I cross the street. I grab my bags. I don't look at them. I'm like, I don't know what y'all are gonna do. Y'all are wild.
But I kind of want to do that on purpose, just to see what I see them coming, and I want them to see the fear and see me run across the street. I can zip up my bag, grab my child a little tighter, and say, "Oh my God, look at that white woman over there. You don't trust them. You know what they're gonna do to you." I
would do it all the time. Sometimes I play a game where I'm like, every single time a white person's coming towards me, I cross the street. So if you stand at the end of the block and watch me, all I'm doing is this the whole time.
That's how you don't, bro. Wow. Okay. What are you afraid of that you can control?
What I'm afraid of that I can control is that I can control what my narrative is by offering it. I am scared of people thinking something of me without having any information about me. And so I can control the information that I offer. And I think that's why I am so incredibly, I don't love the word vulnerable. I am very human. I'm like, I am a human and these are my experiences. If they are, if they seem aggressive to you, or if they seem unfair, or perhaps unrealistic. So many people DM me and just like, is this real? And I'm like, yes. Like people say and do crazy things to me all the time. So I have the opportunity of not hiding those things, of saying, hey, this happened and this is what I was thinking, or this is how I processed it. I wrote something the other day that was about asking white people to please stop being white. And I got a question about that, about like, what is this? And I was just like, this was my thought process when someone was doing something to me the other day, saying and doing something to me that I couldn't get away from. And I was just like, can you please fucking stop being white right now? That was my thought process. And I wrote it down and I put it on LinkedIn. So I have the availability to control what I put out, understanding that it may stop me from getting opportunities or being engaged in a certain way. But it is the little bit of control that I have.
All right. This was fantastic talking to you. This was everything I expected and more. This is part one of a long as this series of discussions. I'd like to think. This is like, I feel like I got a friend, I got a book club member, we have much
I'm
to
in. I'm in.
It's amazing. Where can people find you? Whether it's social media, wherever they want to see your thoughts, where are you most available for people?
At this very moment, it is at LinkedIn, on LinkedIn. My name there is RaRa Rollins. That's RA space RA. Last name is Rollins, Rollins. I try to post at least once a week. It usually is closer to 3 or 4 times a week. And I'm also working with a friend on a very short video that will probably need to be put on a personal website. So that's to come. Still trying to kind of figure all this out. But you can't find me anywhere else. I'm not on LinkedIn, or I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter. I am not on Facebook. I am not on TikTok. I was on all those things, and I decided to exit for my mental health and well-being. So LinkedIn it is.
What's up? I hear you, and make sure that you make your mental health the single most important thing. This was a great conversation. Again, I'm so thankful that I was able to talk to you. Aside from a great episode, I've got a friend for years to come.
Yes.
Speak. I will end with that. Black men in general, as you watch and listen, it can be difficult. And I spoke of that in this episode, that is difficult to find friends, to find a group, to find a tribe. But make sure you do that. Put the effort out. You need people who are like-minded, same experiences, same struggle as you. It makes life easier when you can be reminded that you're not alone in this. This struggle is a universal one. We go through it all. And if you go through it with somebody, we go through it together. It's so much easier.
So much easier.
So much easier. Thank you to you, RaRa. Thank you to Kristen, who does my intro, the voice that starts the podcast, the one that ends it. Finally, to you men, never, ever, ever, ever forget that you are the man and you are prized. Have a great week. I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Peace.